All right, thank you, Avi. So thank you all for coming. I'm a faculty at Rutgers University, Camden. Most of you probably know of Rutgers University. The main campus is in New Brunswick. And they have two other campuses, one in Camden, one in Newark. I'm at the Camden campus, which is about an hour away from here. So to give you an idea about the Camden campus, it's mainly a 4-year college. We have a few master's program, but very few students in the master's program. Most students hold jobs while they are studying. So studying is kind of a part-time activity. Our average age of a student is much higher than an average undergrad age at most other places. And majority of the students transfer from community colleges. So they spend 2 years at a community college, and then they come to Rutgers Camden to finish the remaining 2 years and get a degree. And so there is a very small window of time during which you can have an impact. So when a student comes to Rutgers Camden, they are already in their 5th semester. By the time we get to know a student and you see some potential, they are already looking for jobs. And if they get any jobs, they are going to vanish because they come from really underprivileged background. So even if they get a job at Walmart, they will leave. And hardly any student went to graduate school in the first 14 years since the inception of the department. I joined in 2003. The department started in around 1995. And when I was, until 2009, there was only one person I was told went to graduate school in some business school. Yeah, to give you an idea of the kind of students we have at Rutgers Camden, let me share with you a personal statement written by one of my students when he was applying for summer internships. In high school, I did not care for education and felt it didn't care for me. Senior year in high school, I did not know what was going to happen. I had only applied to one college, Rutgers Camden, the school closest to my home, and had plans on joining the armed forces like 3 of my siblings if I was not accepted. I only applied because in our country, college is what everyone does after high school, since almost any job now requires college education. I was admitted to Rutgers Camden, but I had no idea what I was doing there and barely coasted through courses. I felt like I had no future. And when I joined in 2003, I saw that the students lacked confidence in themselves. When I would tell them, look, you can do just as good as anyone else, they would just laugh at me, or they would just look at me and not say anything. I would tell the faculty, look, these students are just as good as what I see at other places, or they were at least just as good as, or even better than what I was when I was in their shoes. And the faculty basically were not very convinced. Not to blame them, they have been there, they were there for many years. I was the junior most faculty, and they said, look, why don't you just focus on your research, and the students will not bother you and so on. Now, because the faculty lacked confidence in the student abilities, the courses were very watered down. They said, look, our students cannot handle challenging courses, so the courses were very watered down. Now, I had some very bright students in my class, and I didn't know what to do with them. So I would just call them to my office, and I would tell them, look, you should get out of this place. And I would tell them, go somewhere else. Now, given the underprivileged population that Camden had, it was a silly thing to do, but somehow in the first few years, I was able to convince some students to transfer to some of the other schools like Michigan, Penn, and Rutgers main campus. And students went. And this kept happening for the first 2-3 years until 2006. In 2007, I met Bradford Greening, who was a student in my discrete math class, and Brad was one of the best students in the class. I called him to my office and I told him the same thing. Brad, get out of this place. At this place, you will have no future. And he said, Rajiv, I cannot move because I don't have the money. And plus, I'm quite happy here. I'm getting all A's. I have a $35,000 a year job at Comcast as a customer sales representative. And I told him, look, you don't have any future after that. You will remain a customer sales representative maybe for the rest of your life. And he said, no, moving is not an option. To inspire him to do research or even consider academics seriously, I applied for a Dean scholarship, which gave $400 for the entire summer for him to buy books and so on. And people like receiving awards. He got a letter at home from the dean saying that you have got a $400 scholarship to work for the summer. He and I started working on research during the summer. After the first 3 or 4 weeks, Brad disappeared. I would email him, he would not answer. And then first he would answer, not come for meetings, and then even stopped answering my email. Fall comes, I remember in September first week, I see him in the hallway, he sees me, he runs in the other, he goes in the other direction, I chase him down, I call him to my office. And I was very upset, and I said, look, I have to write a report to the dean. And what do you expect me to write? Of course, I could have written anything I wanted, but I wanted him to realize that, look, he is responsible for this. But being a customer sales representative, he was very polite and he said, Rajiv, how can I fix this? And And I told him at that time there was this book lying on my shelf, Proofs That Really Count, The Art of Combinatorial Proofs. And I told him, take this book. He had the background to read the book. And I said, present to me the proofs from the book. He did that for the entire semester, did a fantastic job. He would come with this index cards with the idea of the proofs written, and he would present it to me. At the end, I told him, why don't you prepare a talk and present it in the department colloquium. So this was the first time in the department colloquium that an undergrad student was giving a talk. And he gave a wonderful talk. He also gave a talk at the University of Maryland seminar series. And I got this email from my colleague. You know, I had him in my class a few years ago, and based on that, I would have never guessed that he would be able to give capable of the seminar talk he gave a few weeks back. You've obviously been very good for him. This was in January of 2008, I believe, yes. And at that time, I told him, look, there are other summer opportunities for 2008 coming, and I would like to support you. I would like to write a letter for you, but I'll do it only if you quit your job at Comcast. And he said, what does quitting my job have to do with getting a summer internship? I said, because first of all, your grades are slipping. Second thing, I don't want what you did to me last summer to do. I don't want you to do to somebody else. And he said, Rajiv, you know, that is going to be very hard because I need the money. And I said, how much money do you need? So I took out a piece of paper, we started writing, came to about $500 or so. And I told him, I'll pay you $500. I had no idea how I was going to pay him, but I told him that thinking that, you know, hopefully he will think about it. He said, let me think about it. He went back, he came to my office again, comes with a small face. And, you know, I could just see that, you know, he was very, very troubled. And he told me, I'm not going to be able to quit my job. And I was, of course, very upset. And I said, you know, why not? And he said, look, when I'm talking to you, I'm totally convinced by what you have in mind for me. But when I leave your office and I go to my friends and family, they say I'm totally crazy to even be listening to you. And he said, I'm very torn as to what I should do. And, you know, I have a very secure job right now and so on. So I told him to think a bit more, and you know, I was very frustrated that I could not convince a student to do something what I thought was good for him. Luckily for me, he wrote to me this email, which has turned out to be the most significant event, I would say, in the last 10 years of my working life. It was written past midnight in January. The title of the email was Decision. He said, Dear Rajiv, I would like to try to go for it. Again, the tentativeness in the tone. As per our discussion, I figure even if things do not work out, you see the negative mindset. With the work we will have done, plus the plan to do the data structures work, I will be well able to get another very possibly better job should the worst case happen. Again, he's thinking things will not work out. By my figures, the lower bound of $550 per month would allow me to pay my parents their money. He's talking about paying rent to his parents, right? So even though I was there in Camden for 5 years now, I was not the kind of background that our students had, you know, pay my parents their money plus car insurance and so on, right? So if tutoring cannot fill this, I may be able to supplement from somewhere else. But again, and I asked him later on, I said, Brad, what happened? How come you changed your mind? He said, Rajiv, I had no idea what to do, and I kept going back and forth. And towards the end, when I sat down to write you the email, I was going to write, I will not quit my job. But he said, I don't know what happened, and I just said, I'll quit my job, and I hit enter. So I'm just very happy. And then he got the research experience for undergrads, offer to work at Rutgers, New Brunswick with Professor Nina Pfefferman, under whom he eventually finished his PhD. And 2008, 2009, lot of things happened. So until 2008, I had never got NSF funding. So to help my students, tell them, like, you know, how much money do you make per month by working at Wawa or ShopRite or anywhere else, they would say 300, 400, 500. I didn't know how to give them that money. So luckily for me, I got NSF funding in 2008. That's again another story because of lack of time, I won't say, but somebody at NSF was very kind to give me funding. Another thing was I was very frustrated that still I would not see the quality of courses at Rutgers Camden were still not where they should have been. But then what I thought was, how come the students are not complaining when they know that the same course taught at MIT is so much different than the course taught here? Then I said, well, the advantage is that if the courses are not challenging, the students are not spending enough time on that classes, I can make my course very hard. So what I did was the Math Foundations class, I essentially took Tom Layton's course at MIT, the equivalent course at Berkeley. What they would give to MIT students for a week, I would just give my students 3 days to do the problems at Camden. And this course was required for every course after that. So the students, initially the first semester, students started dropping. And I told them, look, you can drop, but next 3 semesters I'm going to be teaching the course. So if you want to proceed, you will have to take this class. So increase the workload significantly in the Math Foundations course. Students like Tom and James postponed their graduation. So a lot of things happened during these years. Tom Dehart came to my office and said, Rajiv, just want to thank you for all the courses you have taught me. And I'm going to graduate, so that's why I've just come to thank you. I said, what are you going to do after graduation? He said, oh, get a job. And I just immediately said, who will give you a job? I won't. I said, you don't know anything. Now just imagine a professor telling a senior from their department that you're not good enough to get a job. Luckily for me, again, he was very polite. He said, Rajiv, what do you say? What do you suggest I do? I said, just take freshman level classes. I'm teaching these classes this semester. Take them again. He said, no, I've already taken them, done well. I said, no, take them with me. And then if you do well, your career is my responsibility. Again, I didn't know how I was going to deliver on that, but I just said that. And quite shockingly, Tom said, fine, I will not graduate next semester. James Davis was again an interesting example. There was a student, Kelly, in my Math Foundations class. I would ask questions in class. Kelly would answer, sometimes correct, sometimes not correct, but her homeworks were perfect. So I called Kelly. I said, what's going on? And she said, oh, look, I have this friend. She was very candid. I have this friend, James Davis, who's a math whiz. He solves my, he helps me with my math homework. I said, if he's doing so much work for you, why doesn't he take the class? And she said, okay, I'll talk to him. And I didn't expect this. James was a senior. Next class, James walks into my class. And after a few classes, I saw, yeah, he had a knack for math. So I called him in my office. I said, what are you doing these days? He said, oh, I work at ShopRite. And he was very proud about that. He said, I work in the prepared foods department. And I said, what do you plan to do after graduate? He said, oh, I'm going to be in the prepared foods department. I've been working there since my high school. He said, I dropped out of high school. I didn't go to college. I worked at ShopRite for a few years, then came back to college and finishing. I said, would you mind considering not working for ShopRite for 6 months and you and I can do some work together? He said, yeah, that's not a problem. I can get into ShopRite anytime. I said, great. So James and I started working. Now, another thing was I realized that the students at Camden were just as good as students anywhere. But how do I convince the rest of the world when I'm not able to convince my own colleagues at Camden that my students are very good? So I asked the question. I said, what do students at Princeton or MIT or Penn not have that my students can have? And I said, the only way, a 4.0 from Camden won't take them very far. The only way they can stand out is by doing research. So then I offered a class where they would read a research paper. So I would teach them. Another thing you have to understand, students at Camden didn't know how to study because they had never focused on academics. So I had to start by teaching them how to study, how to read research papers. So I offered this course in which students were required to read and present research papers. There were only 6 students in the class. I told them that, so they said they didn't want exams. I said, that's fine. I said, the requirement is, if I teach something in the first class and I ask you on the 10th week, you have to reproduce that without looking at the book. And I essentially wanting them to learn how to teach. So we read research papers and so on. During that semester, all talks in the department colloquium were presented by undergrad students at Camden. And they were cutting edge papers, presented just, appeared in Soda and so on just a few years ago. So, all those talks are there on my webpage. Another thing, Brad got admitted into the PhD program at Rutgers. This was a big deal, right? The first time a student from Camden gets into a PhD program. Now, several students went for internships during that summer, except for one student who applied everywhere and didn't get anywhere. That was Tom Dehart, the student whom I had boldly said, your career is my responsibility. Tom comes to my office and said, Rajiv, he was very sad. And I was even more sadder because he did everything that I had asked him to do. He did well in my courses, but I could not deliver. I asked Tom, I said, what would you like to do? He said, I would like to work in human-computer interaction at Virginia Tech. If possible, they have a good group. So I emailed Virginia Tech folks. I said, can you please take him? Luckily for me, I had NSF funding at that time. So I said, I don't need the money. I can pay him, but please give him a position in your lab. No reply for 2 weeks. I again write to them an email because the program was going to start very soon on June 1st or something. And they said, and I got a reply in 5 minutes saying, we have no money at all. If he doesn't need money, I can give him a position in my lab. That's all we needed. Tom went to Virginia Tech. And then the rest was history. We got the following emails. First for Josh Wetzel, who went to Maryland. Josh was fabulous. We got a poster and oral presentation into the Wabi workshop based on his work over the summer. And now working on a journal paper. I've tried to get him to apply to Maryland for grad school, but he's got some family issues that will probably keep him out of school for a few years. I'll try to be in touch with him and hopefully lure him here. Josh Wetzel is now finishing his PhD at Princeton. Tom, this is the student who got into Virginia Tech. Tom, I have enjoyed working with you on this project. Kathy mentioned you're submitting applications for graduate school. I hope you'll consider applying to UW, that's University of Wisconsin-Madison. We are a well-funded program, highly ranked, and have many opportunities for research. Now, Tom is getting emails from faculty whom he has not even worked with, right? People around the people now come to know of his work, and they are asking him to apply to their system. To their school, and he also gets this email from Virginia Tech. You may recall, we met during your summer research project at Virginia Tech. I heard you're applying for grad admission here. I wanted to encourage you to apply, right? So this is, our students who just a few months before were not considered by almost any place, were not even made an offer for internships, are now getting emails for encouraging them to apply to their schools. James gave wonderful presentation. James was working with me because he was interested in theory, and he made wonderful presentations at University of Maryland at UPenn. I got this email from one of my colleagues there. Thanks, Rajiv. It was good to see both you and your maturing student, James. It's really nice that these guys can understand such key research papers. 4 more students get accepted into graduate programs. James goes to Cornell. Dan Allen goes to Dartmouth. Josh Wetzel to Princeton, and Tom goes to Virginia Tech. Now, more students are interested in pursuing academics. I get these emails. Professor, I quit my job and ready for any challenge you have to offer. So there was a time when I was chasing students. Now I had students who wanted to work with me. So things were much easier. So to give you an idea of the trajectory snapshot of the students, if you take James Davis, his high school GPA was so low that Rutgers Camden would not admit him. We don't have very high standards, but we still didn't accept James Davis. Planned to work for ShopRite, his employer, after high school. Quits his job in early 2009. At ShopRite, starts his graduate studies in 2010 at Cornell, recipient of the NSF Graduate Fellowship, finishes his PhD in 2015, and he joined University of Illinois as an assistant professor. Brad Greening finishes his PhD in 2014. He is now a research scientist at the Center for Disease Control in Atlanta. And Robert McDavid is the student whose personal statement you saw at the beginning of the talk. He's now a student of Jen Rexford at Princeton. And I can go on and on. I can fill up an entire day's worth, or probably even write a book on the stories of these students that I worked with. And these are just a few students. But given the limited time, let me just give you an idea of the kind of things that our students at Rutgers Camden do. Brian Bruback was a filmmaker, 28 years old, came to Rutgers Camden without an undergraduate degree. He took my course in discrete math. For the first time, he learned how to write a proof, right? And clearly saw the talent in him, and I called him. I said, what are you planning to do? He said, I've just come to get a degree. I was tired of filmmaking. I was in Chicago, and I just want to get a degree and get a job. I said, look, you really have a knack for research, especially in theory. Why don't you think of doing a PhD? He said, I'm already married and so on. I said, let me talk to my wife and get back to you. He got back to me saying, I think we are on board. I would like to do a PhD. 1 year after taking a discrete math course, he published a single author paper in theory that was accepted to a conference. Right? So the thing is, again, he had no background, never written a proof, published a single author paper in his undergrad, and now a PhD student at the University of Maryland. Hoon Oh was a student of the summer program that I ran at Princeton, a high school student. SAT scored 1700 out of 2400, got rejected at most schools, got accepted at Rutgers Camden and at Rutgers New Brunswick. He's one of the few students I'd say, come to Rutgers Camden, I think I can help you. Worked with me for a few years, took at least 10 classes outside of Rutgers Camden at Penn and at Princeton, and did very well. He was in fact in Pravesh's class, and he is now a PhD student at CMU. My latest student is Alexandra Rumyan-Seba, whom I met for the first time in September. Has an amazing story, so I want to share with you. She was going to graduate in December, and she took this class on algorithms with me in September. Within the first 2 weeks, I realized that she cannot pass this class. I called her to my office. I said, Alexandra, there's no way you can pass this class. You don't have the background. And she was, in tears. She said, look, I don't even have money to pay next month's rent. And now what will I do? You want me to pay the tuition again and take this course again and pass? I said, look, there's nothing I can do. All I'm telling you is you need to learn the foundations well. I also teach at Penn. So I said, take my first freshman course at Penn. And she first was happy. She said, oh, will that count towards it? I said, no, it won't count towards anything. It will just give you the knowledge. But I want you to understand the basics well. Grudgingly, she took the course, did extremely well, attended every class, every office hours, took the exams, did the homework, everything. And I told her, I think you should pursue computer science. And I convinced her to apply to a master's program at Penn because she was 27 years old. She said, I would love to do a PhD, but I would like to graduate soon. And she got admitted into the master's program, didn't have the money to even pay for the master's program. She didn't have money to pay the rent. Luckily, I knew somebody at PayPal, got her a summer internship. And now she's on her way to become a good computer scientist. She got the PayPal offer. She's currently taking three classes at Princeton without getting any credits. And I can go on and on about talking about Chris Rees was a student. I've never seen a transcript more decorated than Chris. Pages after pages of F grades. You have to flip. Where is a non-F grade? So he had just kept on failing. But after a few years, I saw him again in my class. I said, Chris, what are you doing here? He said, oh, I have decided that I did a lot of crazy things when I was a teenager, but now I've changed and I want to prove to myself that I can take challenging classes and do well. I told him the same thing. You do well. Your career is my responsibility, but I knew how to deliver on that front. So, Chris did well. But when he applied to summer internship, he got nowhere. But I don't blame anyone. He had only F grades. How can anyone even give him benefit of doubt? He said my top choice was University of Southern California. I wrote to Ramesh Govindan, who works in the applied area there. He took Chris. He even paid him. Chris was an expert on cars. So I wanted to meet him on a Saturday at Camden. And I said, Chris, let's meet on a Saturday. He said, Rajiv, I can't come. And I got very upset. I said, I am taking out time on my Saturday to meet with you, and you have the audacity to tell me you cannot come? And he said, yeah, this is when I make money. I said, how much money do you make? He said, $150 an hour. I said, what do you do making $150 an hour? He said, I'm an expert on fixing race cars. So he said, and I said, how did you learn that? He said, oh, on my own. He said, I've been doing it for many years. I mean, how can someone who fixes race cars, learned on his own, cannot be smart? So I had written to Ramesh. I said, the guy is very good, challenge him. And I said, he's an expert on cars. Ramesh says, that's perfect. I'm working on sensor networks with cars. And Chris became the key person in their group. And Ramesh got huge funding from General Motors, and he credits a lot to Chris. Even after the summer when Chris came to Camden, he would have weekly phone calls with Chris, because what Chris's input were for cars, he could not get it from anywhere. So Ramesh even now tells me, he said, this is all because of Chris. So, and this is Huno. I get this email from Penn regarding Hun. He comes regularly, pays attention, and aids the exam. I hope he's finding the class interesting and not too easy. I can still give many stories, but given the limited time, I'll just go further. So this is a statistic. This is a paper written by Susan Hambrush and Ran Hadas and so on. It says that approximately 50% of the US PhD students in computer science come from 54 institutes of baccalaureate origin. This is the top 54 institutes. Remaining 50% come from the remaining 750 institutes. Rutgers Camden clearly belongs to the larger half, a larger group. But until now, from 2009, we have had students who went to these schools. So we have had about 19 students go to, some of the top graduate programs, many of them for PhDs. 2 have won the NSF Graduate Research Fellowships. 1 is the winner of the CRA Undergraduate Research Award, that's Huno. And 2 have won honorable mentions. I've also been working since 2010 with high school students. This again just started with a phone call, a casual phone call to a school saying I wanted to come and give a talk. Again, many things happened. One thing led to another, which I'll skip because of short of time. But the program started in 2010 it was for 9 weeks, 12 students, 6 to 7 hours per weekday. These 12 students, most of them came from just one school, 11 students from one school, 1 student from some other school. But now the program has grown many folds. Last summer we had 100 participants. The program was held in the CS department. Number of applicants has tripled over the past few years, and 35% of the participants were female students. So this is a program where a student comes in 8th grade or 9th grade or 10th grade, or some even college students. They start by learning discrete math. The only background needed is high school algebra. Within 15 months, they are able to do topics that are generally done by graduate students at schools. And this program has had a lot of impact on students. This is the email that I got from one researcher at a top school. Today was Luigi's last day working with me. I want to thank you most sincerely for recommending him to me and supporting him. He's amazing. He's incredibly smart, well-prepared, and tenacious about working on hard problems without giving up. He was working in theory. He's also very nice, as you'll hear from him when he visits to you next week. So after his summer internship, he visited the summer program to give a talk. He contributed significantly to a number of very nice results and has some very impressive results that he came up with entirely independently. I'm happy to take on any student you recommend in the future. I also got this email from Dan Grossman at the University of Washington. This is a quick note of thanks sent with Shield's permission for introducing us and encouraging me to find a way to let him take my majors only programming languages course in this fall. He was a freshman at the University of Washington. Being a large institution with unmeetable demand for our courses, we rarely allow such exceptions, but I took the chance for Shield, and as it turns out for other first-term freshmen as well. Sheil ended up with the highest grade in the course, basically tied with 2 other students in the class of 75 students. He received 100% on the final exam, which no other student did. And of course, he was a delight to participate. Sheil is surely special. But to me, the key line is this. It's also a great evidence that those of us trying to manage large organizations and enterprises do need to be mindful of the value of making exceptions. It's all about making exceptions, giving people a chance. Right? So this is, and I have many more stories about high school students going on and doing amazing work, amazing research. My other project that I've been working with is with students in India, especially at non-IITs, right? I mean, IITians, they don't need me. They have the resources to, succeed and so on. But there are clearly a lot of talent outside of the IITs, which is untapped. So I was a Fulbright fellow in India from January to June of 2011. I wanted to teach, so I taught at Mumbai University to students in the Mumbai University. Hardly any student from those schools went directly for a PhD. Most of the students would come for masters or get jobs. Manish Purohit was a student I was working with at that time, and he was telling me, he said, sir, I've been rejected at most places, and I'm just waiting for a few schools. Luckily, he was waiting for admission from Maryland. And I knew people at Maryland because I got my degree there. So I wrote to people there saying the Manish is amazing and they should take him. And they said, oh, we were going to send him a reject note in a few days. Luckily, they took him and I got this email. Manish is turning out to be a very good student. He finished his PhD in theory, is now working for Google Research. About 20 students are now in the PhD program. And this is an email I got from Swastik regarding Amey Bhangale, who did his PhD at Rutgers, New Brunswick. We have been very happy to have Amey here. He's a very valuable addition to our department. I believe he was Swastik's first PhD student. So, some of the takeaways. People ask me what are the things that work. A few things that worked are, first of all, resource augmentation. For my students, essentially, it is not that they are building their career on their own. I always tell them that we both, that is the student and myself, are going to work towards one goal, that is the student's advancement in their career. So that clearly helps. When 2 people work towards one person's success, obviously the chances are high. Funding from NSF was critical, right? I could not support so many students. I can tell one student, fine, $500, will find a way to pay through tutoring or something. But I cannot do this for 10 students and so on, right? So NSF funding was critical. Family and friends also helped because, sometimes this is very hard. So Robert McDavid is now working with Jen Rexford. There were at least 2 or 3 times he would come to my office in tears and say, Rajiv, I'm done with you. I can't work with you. This is too much for me. I had never worked 30 minutes in the entire semester. He would say 30 minutes in the entire semester outside of my classes. You want me to work 8 hours a day. This is impossible. It's not going to work. So the things that I had to do for every student, for Robert McDavid, because he had this problem of work ethic, every evening before going to bed, he had to write to me a status report every evening. What did he do that day? What is he going to do next day? I said, I will not reply that email, but I want you to keep your promise. So promise less, deliver more. That's what I would tell him. He did that for 6 months. And he said, Rajiv, that was the key to helping me, because he said 6 o'clock in the evening, I would start shivering because I knew I had to write to you an email and I'd done nothing all day. He said, I would drop everything and just sit down and do work. And he was, of course, very smart. So that 3 hours were enough for him to cover a lot. So, those are different people, different things work. Another key thing was depth first versus breadth first approach. This was instrumental, right? So for students at Camden who had only 2 years to graduate, I cannot allow them to take computer organization, algorithms, this, a breadth. I had to take them deeper into one subject, and my only area that I knew well was theory. So I would take them, no matter what they were interested in, operating systems, anything, they had to do theory with me. I would take them deep, I would introduce them to the nice topics and say, look, this is what you can do. Right? And that is what helped them, because they saw that, oh, if I do research, this is what I'm able to do, and so on. So I think that helped a lot, and that also helped them stand out when they applied to grad school, because they would have had some research experience. Role models. Once Brad got into the PhD program, I didn't have to chase students. Students said, oh, I want to do what Brad did. What did he do? Okay, he went to Rajiv, he did this. So there would be a line of students outside my door, so it became much easier. Strong work ethic through the Math Foundations course. Our students at Camden didn't know how to study. I had to teach them how to study. So this Math Foundations course, other courses not being that challenging, turned out in my favor. I could make so I had homework due every class. So they had no breathing room. They had to, one homework is done, they have to start on the next homework. Just help their thinking. And I want to add one more thing. I taught them only theory. In the beginning, when I didn't have others, I would also teach them programming. I would teach them whatever I needed to for them to succeed. But now I teach them theory, and the other courses they learn through other means. They either take the course at Princeton, they just go and sit in the class, or they come to Penn, where I also teach. So they come to take classes there. I want to mention briefly about the high school program. The first year the high school program started, people told me, you are mad, you don't realize this is America. People don't like math, the 8 hours a day of math, you are crazy. So I got worried, so I introduced a programming component. We had an external evaluator who came, and Daria told me at the end of the program saying, Rajiv, students don't like the programming component. They want you to get rid of it. I said, oh, this is maybe a bunch of outliers. Next year, again kept the programming component, again the same feedback. They want to get rid of programming. That is when the entire program became theory, and we just got rid of programming, and it has worked magic. Not to say that these are the students who only go on to do theory. These students eventually, like Robert McDavid, is working with Gen Rexford in networking. But his foundations were in theory. So to me, I'll borrow a quote from Dan's Beam website. He said that mathematics is the key gateway to all STEM fields, and without it, many doors remain closed. I really like that, and I think the program is basically a proof of that students do theory and eventually they branch out in different fields. And finally, the last thing I want to say, give people a chance. I mean, it's not like a vision I had. I was at Rutgers Camden. That was the raw material I had. That is all I had to work with. And what I realized is you give them an opportunity, they will rise to the occasion. And this was a high school student in his personal statement when he applied, I believe in 2012, 2013. He wrote, ordinary people when given a chance can perform extraordinary tasks. And this is the premise on which my work is based. Thank you very much for coming.
All right, welcome everyone. Thank you, Avi, for inviting me. Rajiv, that was a great talk. One of the interesting messages that I feel that I got out of Rajiv was what Rajiv was saying, is that what students are given by default is not enough to be successful. And so that's kind of the focus that I want to take. It's the focus of what we do with our program, Bridge to Enter Advanced Mathematics. I'm going to tell you a little bit about it, and I'm going to try to share some of the things we've learned about how we are helping our students to learn mathematics and to be prepared for study later on. I kind of like to start with this headline because it's so absurd. And you know, if you're familiar with satirical newspapers, you think like, oh, this must be in The Onion or something. It's not. And the thing is that this reflects something that's really true, right? Like students, they say, oh, I love stars, I want to be an astronomer. They hear all of these things about like, you know, can you move faster than light or not? And they hear these sort of descriptions that they don't realize are actually at their core mathematics. And so they come to school, they come to college thinking that they're going to be scientists, and they don't realize that actually what's underlying that is a lot of math. And they certainly don't see the beauty of mathematics itself and don't think of mathematics as something itself to pursue. And so one of the things that we're always thinking about is exactly what Rajiv was saying. Math is a gateway. It's the thing that opens the pathway that students don't even realize is necessary. And we want to try to show that to students and also just in general show them the real beauty of what's out there mathematically. When I'm explaining this to a lay audience, I often give an example of, say, Serena Williams. And I tell them, no one thinks that Serena Williams became one of the best tennis players in the world, if not the best tennis player in the world, because she had a very good high school gym class, right? No one thinks that Beyonce is the musician that she is because of music classes, right? It's that they took their passions and they pursued them and they went beyond what was given to them. And so in the same way that Rajiv is talking about, well, let's go deep, let's show people combinatorics in a deep way, what we want to do is give students exposure to advanced mathematics, show them what a real mathematical proof is, show them how mathematicians think about things so that they can then go on and be successful in their work. Here's an example of what students are given. In New York State, so our program is based in New York. We're expanding to Los Angeles. It's our first new site, but we're based in New York. The exam you take at the end of each year is called the Regents exam. And if you look at the Regents exam, I went through a year of the last Regents exam you have to take, which is Algebra 2 Trigonometry, and I said, what's the most difficult question on here? And this is what I could find. There was the most difficult question on there. Not very hard. And even better than that, it tells you how to do it, right? The not very hard question says this is how you do it. So I did my graduate work at the University of Illinois. And so I went through a typical first exam you would get in calculus, in the calculus class for students who have not taken calculus before. So this is the intro calculus course. It's called Math 220 there. And this is a medium level question, an average question, not the easiest, not the hardest. And if you think about it, this is a vastly more difficult question. It doesn't tell you how to do it. Ignoring even just all of the sort of variables and exponents floating around, you have to think for yourself, like, what does it mean to be in the domain of natural log and actually process it and use multiple steps there? What does it mean for it to be in the domain of the fraction and so forth? Like, there's a lot of processing and thinking going on that is just far beyond the most difficult thing of a typical required high school course. And so if students are going to be successful in math and science later on, they have to go beyond what they're seeing in school. But by and large, they're not. That's not an option that's open to them. Right now, if you look at, say, the math enrichment world, they do this sort of more advanced work. This is where you hear about summer programs and math circles and after-school clubs and so forth. But primarily, the students there are well connected to resources. Right? These are often the students whose parents have PhDs. These are often the students who are relatively affluent, who have those connections. Not always, but frequently. Whereas underserved students, the programs for them are typically focused on test prep and meeting minimum benchmarks. Can you pass your class? What is the graduation rate at your high school? Federal law, the whole basis of federal education law, is about meeting minimum standards. It's not about bringing each student to the best that they can achieve. It's about meeting minimum standards. That's what schools get their funding based off of. And often, the people leading those programs don't have mathematical expertise because you're sort of not as interested in teaching to the test for those minimum benchmarks if you have a more sophisticated mathematical background. So our goal is to bring these two worlds together. Our goal as a program is to provide high-level math enrichment that prepares students for advanced study, to do it for underserved students, and in addition to that, to add the sort of supports that programs for underserved students have. The mentoring, the coaching, the advising, all of the things that well-connected, affluent parents think about for their kids. What summer programs are you going to? How can I help you with your application? How do you advocate for yourself to get into a more advanced course in school? All of those other aspects that maybe are not open to the kids when they're growing up. I figured I should have some data. If you look at the National Assessment on Educational Progress, this is a big chart, and I apologize. Most of the data that you usually see on that is about students who are proficient. This is what I meant about minimum benchmarks. And you can already see big differences between, say, Black and Latino students and white and Asian students on proficiency. You can already see big differences between those who are eligible for free reduced price lunch, the low-income students, and those who are not. But if you look at the advanced level on the National Assessment of Educational Progress, which is not actually that advanced, what you see is that while there are still at least measurable percentages of white and Asian students who score at the advanced level, this hash mark means that it goes down here and says rounds to 0 at the bottom. So there's like no appreciable percentage there. Similarly, if you look at free reduced price lunch students, again, it rounds to 0 for low-income students, but for students who are at least middle class and above, there's an appreciable percentage of them scoring at the advanced level. And so already in 8th grade, you see these dramatic differences in terms of how well students are doing. If you move on to AP Calculus, this is the percentage of the population that participates in the AP Calculus BC exam. And you can see pretty stark differences here. I don't feel like I need to spend a lot of time on this slide. These are the scores they get. So Asian students, mostly 5s, mostly the top score you can get. White students, mostly 5s, mostly the top scores you can get. Among Black students, 1s, the lowest score you can get, edges out all the others. Among Latino students, 5s barely edge out 1s. So what you see is that there's really huge disparities in terms of the preparation that students have when they're taking these exams and what's open to them. In New York City, for what it's worth, there are a number of high schools that don't even offer pre-calculus, let alone offering AP Calculus. And some of the schools that don't offer pre-calculus, 3 of those high schools, have the word science or engineering in their name. They call themselves a school of science or engineering, and they don't offer pre-calculus. They're not required to. You can see that playing out and so this chart, if you want to really break it down, starts to show you sort of how students are going through the pathway. But you can see the differences in terms of students who get a bachelor's degree or better in STEM, right? And you can see those gaps are really playing out as they've built up over time. And then those same sort of gaps happen when you look at PhDs. Again, sort of, it's the same thing coming up. Now, this is a different denominator, right? So this is looking at what percentage of PhDs go to Black or Hispanic students, as opposed to out of all Black or Hispanic students, how many are getting PhDs. And the reason that I highlight it this way, so it's still a much smaller amount than is represented in the population of the US. But the reason I highlight it this way is that actually there has been at least some improvement over time. And so to me, that's a strong sign that more improvement is clearly possible. Because we've seen some improvement, we know we're not capped at what it was in '95. We're not capped at what it was in 2004. That suggests strongly that we're not capped at what it was in 2014. And so we should be working hard to improve access to the kind of study that prepares students for this level of work. All right, fabulous. That's sort of where we are now. Now I want to.
Data which has got to do with economic background rather than racial background.
Unfortunately, I have not been able to find that data on PhDs. I would really like to get it. This is data that's, I believe, collected by the NSF, but I have to check that. No, I don't. I have it in the notes to this slide, but I can't see the notes on that computer. They do not have data based off of what was your financial situation growing up, unfortunately, as far as I know. If you find it, please tell me. Right, so that's historical data. Now I'd like to talk a little bit about sort of the philosophy of our program. Most people, when they think about education, they think of a line. You start in first grade, you go to second grade, you go to third grade, each thing comes naturally after the next. But I would bet that for most of the people in this room, that's not actually what we experienced. Instead, what we did was a whole number of programs that helped us prepare for where we are now. It might have been math competitions, math summer programs, it might have been independent reading, it might have been programming projects, it could have been all kinds of different things. But by and large, they're things that students do that prepare them for the level of thinking that's expected of them later, and that grows their excitement and that gets them ready for it. So our goal, the reason we call ourselves Bridge to Enter Advanced Mathematics, is that we want to transition our students to doing these same kinds of programs. So we try to give them an introduction to this kind of thinking, and then we try to work with them and coach them on applying to these programs, on taking advantage of them, on getting there, on succeeding there, so that they can continue to go further. So, that starts in 7th grade. There's a lot of sort of different kinds of thinking that you can do. So this is a student the summer after 7th grade doing a projective geometry course. I think it was called incidence geometry, actually, but she's studying the 7-point projective plane, the Fano plane. And actually what happened was that Stephanie, the student, was given this question of how could you create a geometry with just those points over lunch, and she figured it out over lunch, and now she's presenting it to the class in the afternoon. But the math somehow isn't enough on its own. So we've had a number of students who've gone through our mathematical preparation and did fantastically, and then there were just a number of other obstacles that prevented them from success. It might have been some sort of difficulty at home. We had one student who was one of our mathematically strongest students who got kicked out of their home, and that basically ended the opportunity to study advanced stuff for a couple of years because of dealing with that. We've had parents who objected to students going away from home to study over time. We've just had a lot of cases of, and we've had students who had adjustment difficulties. They went to a really great elite high school, and then, Stuyvesant High School, for example, the sort of top high school in New York, this year admitted over 900 students, of which 10 were black. And so you can imagine going there and coming from a very different environment for all of your peers and feeling very left out from it. And so we've had students who transition to these sort of more like educational powerhouse places, and then they have a lot of difficulty fitting in and succeeding there. So there's a lot more to, so one of the first lessons I want to present is just that there's a lot more to it than just the math. There's also that sort of career guidance, right? It's the same thing Rajiv was talking about, really telling the student, no, go quit your job. No, go do this. And we don't usually tell our students to quit their jobs, but we definitely talk to them about how do you plan things out to be successful? How do you develop the study skills to be successful in this environment? How do you find a social group that works for you in this environment? All of these things so that they can be successful in all of the ways that they have to be successful. This is definitely a solvable problem. There are things we can really do to help our students. And what I want to do now is give you a little bit of a tour of the things that we've done, along with the things we've found to be successful as we've done them. So, BEAM, Bridge to Enter Advanced Mathematics. It was founded in 2011. Our program now runs 6th through 12th grade. So we try to really be a comprehensive pathway.
Where is it?
Right, so it's based in New York. We have some are after 6th grade programs and some are after 7th grade programs, and then Saturday programming as well as individual work with students during the year. So right now it's just New York City. This summer it's opening in Los Angeles for the first time. And it really is about giving them the beginning mathematically with those summer programs, but then really following up individually with the students afterwards to keep them on that path and to work with them and their families to help them be successful. It is free for underserved students in New York. So I'm not a professor anywhere. This is my full-time job. We have a staff doing this work. So at the moment we have 9 staff that are working on this program. We're going to have 380 students this summer. We hire a lot more people over the summer to teach at the program. We hire undergrads as counselors. We have a system that's come into place to make this happen, because what we hope to do is to create a program that can be replicated, that can exist all around the country, and that can create pathways to really excelling in math everywhere. So, the 3 things we do. We offer academic preparation. We offer social emotional preparation. So how can you be successful when you go into one of these environments where suddenly the work is much more challenging, where suddenly you might be the only kid that looks like you, where suddenly like the culture of the people around you, they don't make the same references you do, they don't speak in quite the same way you do. How do you stay true to yourself and be successful there? I know that for me as a high school student, when I first went to a math program, it felt like going home. I was finally among my people, right? And somehow we want them to have a feeling of belonging even while they stay true to themselves and to feel comfortable in who they are. So that's a big part of what we do. And then building in the opportunity to access those other programs. What do you apply to? How do you apply to it? How do you make yourself compelling? A lot of kids get help with their college applications from their parents or even from a paid preparer of college applications. We want to give our kids access to that sort of essay brainstorming. They can talk about their essays with us. We can proofread their essays for them. We can strategize on what colleges can you apply to that are going to be able to offer full financial aid. All of those different logistical things that can prevent a really bright student from ending up somewhere where they can really succeed. We start with a summer program, the summer after 6th grade. This is really both a preparatory program and a tryout. So after this summer program, we send them during the year as well, and then they can either be admitted to our 7th grade residential program, which takes place on a college campus, or we might recommend them to other programs based on, this wasn't quite the mathematical fit for you, this wasn't quite the social fit for you, here are other places you could go. And in particular, this means that we don't have to base our selection of students on some single exam or a single teacher recommendation. We could admit broadly, we can see how they do when they're challenged, and then we can really find the students that will be a great fit for going on with the rest of the program. Once they're into Beam 7, so this is Beam 6, this is Beam 7, once they're into Beam 7 and they've been successful there, we commit to 5 years of support for them. In 8th grade, that means, first of all, that we're helping them with the incredibly Byzantine New York City high school admissions process. All of the 470-some high schools in New York, you can apply to. It's not based on where you live. I mean, where you live can factor into admission for some of them, but not most of them. And so figuring out how that works is actually like a process. Uses the stable matching algorithm or stable marriage algorithm. And we help them through that. We help to make sure they can do algebra in 8th grade because many of their middle schools don't offer algebra. And if you haven't taken algebra before high school, then you're not going to get to calculus in high school. And we see that as really helpful in preparing for science and math careers later on. And then 9th through 12th grade, we continue weekend enrichment with them. We coach them on accessing all kinds of opportunities and ultimately on the college application process. Everything from when do you take the SATs and how do you pay for them to picking what colleges to apply and so forth. So in New York, the 6th grade program is a day program that happens in the city, but the 7th grade program is residential. It happens upstate. We find that the social environment of living away from home is really, really valuable to them, as is understanding how to live away from home on a college campus. Because if you get that from an early age, you feel better about going away to college later, and you can also go to some of these other residential programs later that maybe don't have the same supports built in for these specific low-income students, but you're still comfortable living away from home. You've had that experience. As I said, this year we're opening in Los Angeles. That program is opening up this summer. So hopefully we will in fact find out that we can replicate what we've done in New York and that it can be successful. Our executive director there is great, so it'll be fine. But we haven't done it yet, so I don't, you know. This is Beam 6. This is the 6th grade program. Beam 6 is interesting because it's really about preparing for success in future mathematics. So the courses are designed to be, you know, preparing you for that kind of work. Things like logical reasoning, building some math fundamentals, at least taking some piece of math in school and understanding why it's true rather than seeing it as just a procedure that you have to sort of mindlessly apply. Math team strategies, we find that contest math problems, especially if you take away the time limit, are just interesting. They engage you in a new way. And so we like using those as a way to build students' creativity in math. And then some form of applied mathematics. And they get to choose a course in each of these, but something that gives them a bigger picture of how math is used in the world. And then there are sort of one-off math circles that are designed to be a little bit more abstract, a little bit more enrichment-y. You get an hour to just explore something. Some of the things that we've learned while doing this. There are a lot of irrelevant barriers to student success in math. And a lot of times what happens is that you encounter a student and something's blocking them a little bit, and you say, well, they just don't have what it takes necessarily to be successful, and that is not true. So for example, sometimes you see a student who doesn't understand some fundamental thing of how a piece of math works. That is often because they've been trained in a really procedural way for approaching math from a young age. And that builds on itself in school. If you're getting 8th graders who've been trained procedurally up to then, you can't go back and re-explain how fraction addition is supposed to work because you don't have time. You have to move on with the material you're supposed to move on with. But that forces you to work in a procedural way. And so there's this chain reaction of students have learned everything by rote. A lot of times students are missing basic skills, which happens frequently if they're coming from a classroom that wasn't able to focus on things as much. They might be really bright, but if their parents aren't helping them with their math to make sure that they're able to keep up with it, and the school doesn't have the support and the kind of classroom environment where they can get it, then they're just going to be missing basic skills. They might not be used to creative problem solving. And there can be a real issue with lack of reading comprehension, where they don't know how to read a problem and they don't understand the precision of mathematical language, and interpreting it is what's stopping them from succeeding. So let me give you an example. This is a problem in the math counts competition. And it's basically, logical thinking, divide things up, find a way to process this question. So using the figure of 15 circles shown, how many sets of 3 distinct circles A, B, and C are there such that circle A encloses circle B and circle B encloses circle C? It's clearly stated, but for our students, the language could be a barrier to this. So we might rewrite as follows. How many different ways are there to choose 3 circles of different sizes from the diagram at right, so that the smallest circle you choose is inside the medium circle you choose, and the medium circle you choose is inside the largest circle you choose? It's the same question. Mathematically, it's completely equivalent, but now it's a little bit easier to understand. And in particular, this use of variable names for the circles can be really confusing. And so here we're able to avoid it, and we'll see more students succeed on this question, which shows what they're actually able to do mathematically. Here's another question. This is a great question if you've never solved it. This is just a delight. A number n is called squarable if it is possible to break a square into n smaller squares. For example, blah, describe the set of all squarable numbers. Compared to, is it possible to divide a square into 4? It is possible to divide a square into 4 squares, 8 squares, or 9 squares as pictured below. What other numbers are possible? What other numbers aren't possible? So we avoid the mathematical language of sets, which we would want to introduce to them at some point. But without having a proper introduction to it, it can be a blocker to actually diving into the math. And it can make you think that a student is not ready for this problem, when in fact they are ready for this problem. So that's one example of a lesson that we've gotten out of working with the students. I don't remember the purpose of this slide. I think it's just to show you pretty pictures of the summer. I actually do. I think the purpose of this is basically to show you that there's a non-academic component to what's going on as well. There's a community that the students are building. They're seeing that there are people like them who are really interested in math. And that community often sticks with them. We have students from our first summer in 2011. They're still really close friends with each other. They talk all the time about their experiences. They're always incredibly excited to see one another. Like, they build a really close environment from being through this together. And now they have peers who are doing the same kind of work that they're doing, who are striving in the same way that they're striving. During 7th grade, we send them math at home to work on. Then they can be admitted to a residential site on a college campus. Bard College and Union College are the 2 places we go. It's outside the city. It's upstate, so that they get something really different. Many of them have never been outside the city before. In fact, one of our 11th graders, we're taking a few of our students to Los Angeles as sort of dual purpose. We're visiting some colleges, and we're having some dinners in the evening where they can tell donors about how great we are. And I was talking with one of the students who we invited to go because he's been really involved with us. And it came up that aside from this trip to Bard College back in 2014, he's never been outside of New York City. Just never been out of the city. And so that experience, not hearing traffic as you go to sleep, can be a really big deal to the students. In Beam 7, so this is after the students have done a year with us, now we start to sort of pick up the mathematical pace quite a bit. We really want to prepare them for that kind of thinking. We really want to introduce them to ideas of mathematical proof. So now we're doing some basic number theory, some basic combinatorics. Our faculty propose their own courses. So each year is different. Everyone designs their classes. And you can see that it's like really quite a variety of stuff that the students get to choose between. So each week they pick a topics course to focus on. And you can sort of see that they get a really good exposure to different parts of math. And I should emphasize, this is still not at a super sophisticated level. But it is like really getting into the meat of what's going on. So a number theory course might focus on like having the students develop a proof of the infinitude of primes, modular arithmetic. Maybe you'll have a course that's focused on understanding the Chinese remainder theorem, things like that. Another really important thing to note about working with our students is that the logistics matter. So there can be all kinds of things that are blocking student participation. So, transportation itself is a big issue. So in New York, we buy literally hundreds at a time of 2-ride Metro cards so that students can take the subway. They can come in, they can get a Metro card, they're able to like use that to get back home and then come back in, just to solve that transportation problem. We spend a lot of time communicating why is this important? Why is this going to make a big difference to your future that you're participating in this program? All of these different fees can cost money. We've actually established a last dollar fund so that if you get funding to go to a great summer program, but they're not going to cover the $100 in bus fare there and back, we'll take care of it. That's not going to be the thing that's going to stop you from a 5-week residential math experience that's given you a scholarship. But they could be somewhere else. We've bought textbooks for students that needed them for these courses. Like, we just make sure that there's not a financial barrier to doing what they have to do. And there can be all kinds of different events in their lives, and you have to be aware of that, and you have to be able to address that while also making sure that they don't lose sight of academics going through that. And this is why we're so focused on how do we build a really complete pathway for our students to get into math-related fields. It's why we continue after the summer with Saturday classes that do both enrichment mathematics, but that also build life skills, that are also talking about study skills, how you succeed socially at your new high school, how you plan ahead for all of the things you need to do. Essay writing is a big one that we talk about. How to answer emails. Oh my goodness. The number of times we email our students and they never even open it. And we've had students who missed scholarship opportunities because they didn't see an email asking them to reply back with something. And that's a sort of silly thing that can stop a student from succeeding. So we've refocused how we do things to start to build that from an earlier age. We have office hours where students can drop in to get help with whatever they're working on. We just open our office every Thursday from 3 p.m. to 8 p.m. for them to come in, as well as one Saturday a month. They can just drop in. We have volunteers there to work with them. We try to show them where this can lead to them. So, we do a visit to Google's New York offices. We visit colleges around the area. We offer a lot of college guidance, and it's down to the point where it's like, okay, here you are in this room. Let's start on your essay. Why don't you start brainstorming how you're going to answer it? Then we'll talk about it. Then you can start writing. For students who don't have laptops at home or computers of any sort, we have students who write their essays on their phones, their school essays. They're writing them on their phone. And that's not a way to produce a good essay. So providing that place that they can go to have access to a real computer can be really important. We do college trips. And then, we stay with the students through high school graduation. We're thinking about adding college support as well, just to sort of help them be successful with whatever barriers might come up. For time reasons, I'm going to go through our results relatively quickly, but I just want to show you quickly what happens when you're able to make this kind of investment in students, when you really think about all of the different things that are going to support them going forward. Well, for one thing, we see a lot of mathematical growth over the summer. And I apologize, I forgot to update this slide when I copied it from an old presentation. But if you see at our summer sites, we use a math contest because I don't really know what kind of assessment is out there for looking at problem-solving skills other than math contests that has some at least reasonable national norm. So we look at the median ranking that the students achieve nationally on the AMC8. That's the math contest we use. And we see just over 3 weeks really significant growth in terms of where our median student ends up in performance on this contest. So we're seeing a lot of problem-solving growth as they proceed over the over the time. We have students who are admitted to really excellent high schools. Again, I forgot to update this slide. I apologize. We're actually just getting in our high school results now, but where you go to high school matters a lot in New York, right? So with so many schools not offering calculus or even pre-calculus, it's really important that they end up in good places that will be supportive. So we try to help them through that process to get them into the right places to be successful. We work really hard to get them into great summer programs where they're going to be able to continue learning and where they're going to be able to get scholarships. So that includes things like the New York Math Circle and the Center for Talented Youth, as well as lots of other programs where we have a few students going in one at a time, two at a time, but it's like what they can qualify for, what they're interested in. We help them to apply and to go. Again, the same way that a well-informed parent would help them to go. And I just want to end by showing you a couple of things students say. I'll just focus in on two of them. Andy, who's actually now a high school senior, I really love that after his summer with us in 7th grade, he said, I learned to love math's beauty. Because that's sort of not the usual sentiment you hear from a kid. And what Andy was referring to, he told me about this, what he was referring to was two particular moments while he'd been there that summer. One was when he'd seen the uncountability of the reals, and one was when he'd seen the closed form for the Fibonacci sequence. And you sort of look at that and you're like, this is pretty good taste in terms of like what you're enjoying while you're there in 7th grade. And he had no opportunity to see something like that before, but he really got that exposure when he came to the summer with us. And Kwabi over here is interesting to me because he basically spent the summer obsessed by infinity. And so there was a professor who was teaching with us, and Kwabi would sit with him at lunch all the time, and they would talk about ordinals and cardinals. And Kwabi would just push for more all the time from him to understand how that worked. And it really is the sort of thing where Kwabi hasn't had the opportunity to do a lot of other enrichment math since then, but he can still write a beautiful proof. He just does it. He just knows how to do it. He just internalized it completely from that. And so that's the sort of experience that really shows me where these kids are going and what they're going to be able to do and what you can do with a really thoughtful environment for them. So that is BEAM and a little bit of what we've learned. Thank you very much.